So, welcome to the coronavirus world. Um, I didn't originally plan to make this video, but of course, over the last few days, coronavirus hype and coronavirus news and coronavirus shutdown has turned totally global, and it's looking increasingly like the entire geopolitical and geoeconomic world system is going to be irreversibly affected by this pandemic and by this virus. The point of this video is certainly not to spread panic, but it is a result of some of my own personal meditations over the past few days on how we should make sense of this philosophically. Because of course, there are the two extremes of people who are panicking on a very irrational and extreme level, and there are those perhaps who, on the other extreme, feel like this is irrelevant or too much of an overreaction to this virus. And the point of this video is, again, just to try to interpret coronavirus from a philosophical point of view and to hopefully give some perspective and context on why I think this event is philosophically interesting, but also with pragmatic application to perhaps future similar events and the way in which we geopolitically and geoeconomically organize. So, the first thing I want to say is that the strange thing about this event is that the coronavirus is simple and stupid. And what I mean by that is that when we usually think about a global catastrophe, it could be a terrorist threat, for example. It could be the use of atomic weapons. Of course, the Cold War was structured by the threat of global catastrophe and the use of atomic weapons. But of course, in our current ideology, we also have other memes that are representative of global catastrophe, like, for example, the threat of artificial intelligence. There are many people, for example, Nick Bostrom, philosopher at Oxford, who warns of an intelligence explosion that could take over the entire planet and replace human beings. Of course, we have many movie representations of a confrontation with aliens where we have to confront a higher intelligence that has come to the planet and poses an imminent threat to humanity. But the interesting thing about the coronavirus is that viruses are extremely simple. They're simpler than life. They're so simple that they don't really or can't really be categorized as life. They use life to replicate themselves. And they are, for lack of a better word, stupid. They are thus the opposite of our intuitive ideology of what poses a global catastrophe, or what poses a threat to a global catastrophe, where we usually think of something perhaps very complex, where we perhaps think about something very intelligent. And in that sense, it is a humbling event. A humbling event in the sense that the very foundation of our civilization rests on many unconscious processes, physical, chemical, and biological, of course, ecological as well, that are in themselves much simpler and much less intelligent, much less conscious than we are. But a very simple mutation, a very simple alteration, a very simple change in any of these unconscious, simple processes which our civilization depends on can totally bring the whole of our civilization to a standstill. And I think that this is best represented as a type of inhuman core. What I mean by inhuman core is opposite from non-human. So in our almost spontaneous intuitive ideology, scientific ideology, the coronavirus is non-human. Viruses are non-human. But when we think about the coronavirus in the context of its entanglement with humans and the global economy and global political organizations, it is rather the real of the coronavirus is the way in which it is entangled with the phenomenal human realm. And this entanglement with the phenomenal human realm, as much of physics, chemistry, biology, and so forth is, requires a different representation, requires a different understanding, requires a different engagement. Because it's not about the chemical or other properties of the virus, but it is the way in which this mutation creates a type of phenomenal negativity for us. And the way in which this mutation creates a phenomenal negativity for us is the way in which it becomes politically represented, the way it disrupts economic networks, the way it, in a very existential sense, brings many of us, our networks, to a confrontation with unbearable situations. You could see, for example, images of people being turned away from help, a lack of respirators, entire societies having to quarantine and self-isolate, and so forth and so on. So I think that this is again something that we should reflect on in a humbling sense, in a sense that as intelligent and as complex as we are, certainly the most complex and the most intelligent life that we know at the moment, we should be very reflective of just how dependent we are on extremely simple and extremely stupid processes, which, through even a very slight modification in their basic structure, threatens to bring us down from within. And this is the inhuman within, as opposite of just non-human objective reality, for example. The second thing I want to bring attention to is the idea that the coronavirus is a potentially part of a subcategory of larger problems, which we are increasingly going to need to be thinking about in terms of the commons. Pandemics are a common problem, and there is a high likelihood that the coronavirus is something, even if we get through it with low levels of infections and low levels of, or low mortality rates, it may be a sign of things to come. If not the coronavirus, some other virus, some other bacteria, some other mutation can spread very quickly, and within weeks, within days, can be totally global. And that means that our future political and economic organizations will have to think about not only biological threats to the whole of humanity, but also many other categories of threats which are in need of global interpretation. whether that be technological, whether that be social, whether that be economic. We are in a era now where cascading failures are not just local but global. And the notion of commons, as opposed to communism or as opposed to capitalism, is not a positive project that has a coherent total understanding, like we cannot implement a common political order, for example, but rather the commons denotes a problem. The commons denotes the problem of coordinating as a global network. There's not one plan or one project that could become the commons, probably, but rather it's a way of thinking. The way of thinking is that it's not that we are, in a naive communist notion that we are all going to be a united humanity, all one together, getting along in social harmony and social cohesion with each other. It's rather the identification of a real that is now global, and that real is that tensions internal to the human community are in need of global interpretation. Tensions internal to the human community that will divide and destroy us, whether no matter what form they take, whether biological, chemical, physical, or whatever, require a outlook and a political willpower, and I would say, philosophical wisdom that is capable of approaching the level of the commons. And hopefully, what comes out on the other side of the coronavirus crisis is a awareness. The inhuman negativity that this is generating can be responded to from a place of a low level of consciousness where we panic and freak out, or it can be a call to higher consciousness. And by higher consciousness, I don't mean that we are all one in some abstract, harmonious sense, but rather that we are confronting a real of tensions and antagonisms that do unite us in some very pragmatic sense, in some very pragmatic and some very immanent sense. So those two aspects, that this outbreak is something that should humble us, in the sense that our complexity and our intelligence is now being brought to its knees by something very simple and stupid, and that our duty in this situation is to bring our consciousness to the fact that our civilization is not just global in some abstract rhetorical sense that we are all one, but rather that our networks are now so entangled that any small deviation to simple subsystems upon which our entire civilization depends can bring everything crashing down from within very quickly. And we will require new consciousness that can interpret problems on this level. I hope everyone watching this video is well. I hope everyone watching this video is taking the necessary precautions to find safety and to hopefully come out on the other side of this this situation with a deeper sense of self and a new perspective on the world in which we live. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.